Hello and welcome back to the Poultry Network podcast. I'm Tom Woolman.
And I'm Tom Willings.
Are you all right, Tom? You sound a little bit under the weather.
Yeah, I'm in desperate need of some decongestant. I sound pretty nasal. I'm going to try and keep my trusty tissues to myself for the duration of this episode, or should I say these episodes?
Yeah, because we're going to do something slightly different, aren't we? But this time,
you've been doing that thing again. You've been out and about meeting people.
That's right. Glad handing people and hobnobbing at various establishments. And one of the recent establishments, in fact, it was at the Southwest Chicken Association Christmas dinner. I was chatting to gentleman David Mark, and we had a great big long chat about his career and all the sorts of things he's done in his career. And actually, there were an awful lot of things that came out of it that we thought, you know what, this would make really good, interesting material for the podcast. So we've actually decided to do two episodes with David. So welcome, David, to the podcast.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Yeah. So have you listened to the podcast before, David?
Oh yes, many. I don't think I'm 100%, but I'm pretty well up with them. I listen to.
It's the beauty of being retired, David. Of course.
Yeah. I have so much time.
Yeah, very little else to do.
I certainly listened to my ex-colleague Aaron McKenna's piece, which was really interesting. But I've listened to many, and I've enjoyed them.
Yeah. So we thought, David, for this podcast, really, we wanted to talk about, I guess, some of your personal reflections in terms of the poultry industry and what's changed since you first entered it. So you're consulting now, aren't you? But I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about some of your career, really, just a bit of a brief overview.
Yeah, I can do that. We started to discuss, and I was really reflecting back on my career, because while I'm doing a bit of consulting now, I'm nearly retired. I'm not precious about it. I'll be 70 on my birthday this year. I entered into the work environment in 1979, working firstly in a small agricultural co-op, dairy co-op like Patrick, moving then to the Marketing Board for Northern Ireland and working in that sector for 8 years, headed up quite a large site, Bangor Dairies. And then I had a bit of a midlife crisis, and I was recruited by McDonald as a franchisee.
Oh, really?
Yeah, did that.
I never knew that.
Yeah, I did 1 year's training, which was really very basic. You do everything from cleaning the toilets to cooking all the menu items to working on lobby to learning the finances, going to Hamburger University. I have a lot of time for McDonald's. It didn't work out for me, and after 3 years, I decided it wasn't for me, but I have utmost regard for them and had to get back onto the corporate ladder again. Started doing some work in the liquid egg business in a company called Quality Egg Products, which at that time was a partnership with Frampton's from Somerset and what had been the Gracie egg business at Hill Hall in Northern Ireland. And we sold that business to Charles Crawford and
Ready Eggs.
And that's now become the basis of the Ready Egg business and what that's gone on to do. Fantastic things. I then that was owned at that time by O'Kane's, Billy O'Kane Poultry. It's one of the four companies that make up Pilgrim's Europe poultry division, if you like. It started with Moy Park, then they under the various companies they bought Padley's in Lincolnshire, Dove Valley in Derbyshire, and then latterly O'Kane's. So I was in head of technical in O'Kane's. I was factory based. I'm a food technologist by training, and I was dealing with customers right down at the whole process level, technical level, specification level. Very interesting time. 4 factories at that time: Ballymena, Flemings, and Ballymoney. Castlemahan down in County Limerick, and a small red meat processing plant. And I moved from that for a period to work for the Ulster Farmers Union, running a commercial business, which was involved in cattle sheep identification, but dealing directly with farmers, running a number of projects out of European-funded projects. And then I moved to Moy Park 15 years ago to head up the Northern Ireland growth bases when they went for going for growth back in 2013. And that was an exciting time. I then, for a period in Moy Park, I was customer support. So I met Tom one time in Marks and Spencer some time ago, and that was the whole agricultural bona fides of the business. Really working with the supermarkets, got a lot of insight there with the likes of McDonald's and M&S. And
so I always think, David, I've been in the poultry sector for just over 15 years, I suppose. So it's a relatively short period of time since I graduated, and I'd meet some of the other people, and people would be talking about businesses that I've never heard of. And there used to be an awful lot of different businesses, didn't there, in all sorts of sectors, whether it's in eggs, whether it's in hatching, whether it's in broiler processing, etc. And a lot of these smaller businesses aren't around anymore, are they? And yet some of those businesses that started up are now the great big household names, really. So what are some of your thoughts as to why certain businesses have survived and have grown, and why others have fallen by the wayside? I mean, a lot of it must come down to governance, is it, in terms of the way that these organisations are run?
Well, at one level, I mean, for small companies, governance is an issue, and we could cover that. But I think and I'll use the Moy Park scenario as I understand it best. I still believe within that company there are 4 veins of expertise and knowledge of institutional memory. Padley's business was very, very heavily involved in the farm side, had a real discipline of tidiness and cleanliness and disciplines on farm, almost a military precision.
Well, I remember people saying to me, Padley's farm staff had to wear shirt and tie, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think, well, it was always Mr. Padley or Mr. David or Mr. Stephen, but that was in a respectful way. And they would have had an inspection once a year on farm level, and it was a bit like the Queen coming to visit you. Everything had to be perfect. And people, in a way, laughed at it, thinking it was only a show. But in reality, it brought the farm once a year. It's like a spring cleaning. It brought everything back. And that culture within that whole maintenance divisions in Padley still runs through the organisation. Dove Valley was very customer focused, very connected with customers. That's a strong part of what they do. Moy Park itself in Northern Ireland worked with a lot of smaller farmers, very much involved in specialty. So while those 4 companies are now one, or now Pilgrims Europe, along with the pig side, all that heritage is still within those companies, and they can all be respected within them. And I'm sure that's the same in some of those other organisations, going back to Grampian or going to Buxton or whatever. So that's my experience. I suppose one of the points I was going to make was, when I entered the industry, and okay, it was a dairy industry, it was a very different place. Simple things like, smoking. About half of the people smoked. And people smoked in canteens, they smoked in changing rooms. And if you went to a meeting, everybody had to endure the smoke. But, for other people now who, since the smoking ban came in pubs, could hardly believe that was the nuance of the time. But equally well, I, as a 22-year-old with my qualification, was an assistant dairy manager. I wore a white coat. I was addressed as Mr. Mark. We had a different canteen. It was the same canteen, and there was just a shutter dividing us. But the staff in the creameries wore blue boiler suits or blue coats, and there was that differential. And all of that hierarchical thing has changed completely.
Yeah, and I've seen that myself in my own career. Having worked for businesses that have been amalgamations and combinations of different previous businesses. Yeah, you're right. You see very different approaches to hierarchy, to dress code, to, as you say, how people of a senior disposition are treated and how they connect with people that would be on farm or would be on the factory floor. And I've even in my short time, I feel quite privileged to have seen those different types of cultures, because they are different. Businesses are so different when it comes to culture, and it's not always something you can write down. It's you really have to unpick it and look at what people do as opposed to what. sometimes.
I would say my experience, you can feel it. You know, you've got you talk about businesses that have acquired other companies over time, and you know, part of your first question there, Tom, was, you know, why does it happen? How does it happen? How do some survive, as it were, and others not? And I'd say, to David's point, they all survive, and they maintain where there is sort of geographic, site specific distinction as to, you know, what the backstory is for a particular location. The culture doesn't feel very different in those places. You know, there's still the kernel of identity as to what the original name above the door was, and they know what they were good at, or you know, what they were renowned for, and they're very proud of that. You know, the recognition that they were, take the Padley example, that they were disciplinarians, or you know, very focused on detail or hygiene or whatever it might be. But so in my career, going through businesses where there have been acquisitions, you know, when you're in you know, a certain patch of the company's history, and I think that should be protected to a degree. I know that culture in any large organisation is critical to success, and everyone has got to have the opportunity to thrive. But it's nice to be reminded that you know, there's some diversity there to start with, and that those different sets of skills were appreciated.
I think, you know, looking at some of these changes, as you say, when a new owner comes into the business, and even within Moy Park, there were a number of changes. I think for me, the senior team coming in, if they at least stop and think before they decide what they're going to do, to try and identify what are those strong points and try to work off that corporate memory and take the best of it. And in many ways, you know, I think we've seen that on some occasions. Where other occasions, things maybe have been thrown out that shouldn't have been thrown out. The other thing I think that does happen as companies get bigger, there's obviously more money involved, there's more capital invested, there's outside input, and that does help to strengthen the corporate governance. Now, we can get frustrated by it, you know, SOX requirements and all sorts of issues but they are important, and those are the things I think help keep those companies going to the next phase. And that's really that's an important thing. And when we look at those older companies back in the day, people had all the right intentions, but you know, if you had one or two individuals who had a particular notion, there was no mechanism that actually kept them on the straight and narrow necessarily. So things like an audit, you know, audit commission, you know, internal auditing, compliance, all of that really, while it is a burden at times, I think as companies grow, it's inevitable that happens and it's needed. And when I look back in the agricultural sphere, I look at some of those smaller organisations in Northern Ireland that didn't make it. And you look back and say, did we sit down and learn why they didn't do it? And I'm also, you know, it's in the poultry industry, you see it to a degree, but where we're trying to get farmers involved on farmer boards, I really think we have to invest a lot of time in training people so they can go onto boards and they can be productive. And I think there's a lot that can be done there. And I've noticed in Northern Ireland, I'm on the non-executive director of the Livestock and Meat Commission. You know, that's appointed by the minister. You know, when you look at how these things come forward, and the competencies that are required, it's quite hard to get farmers onto these boards now. While they are very capable of doing it, what they need is a training module that will pick up those competencies. You tend to have them if you're coming from corporate life because you pick them up in what you're doing. You've served in internal audit committees within the organisation. You've been in HR committees. You've been in HR appeals, etc. That builds your knowledge, and I think it's really important because as we talk about this industry, it's all about partnership, and farmers have to be seen that there is no Avara, there is no Moy Park, there is no Two Sisters without chicken, and there's no chicken without farmers. And it is that delicate partnership. And when I'm doing the consultancy work I'm doing now, that has to come across. Now, there will always be those niggly discussions around costing and benefit, etc. But generally, I think the industry is in a good place. They work well together. The relationships with the supermarkets, I think they've got long-term relationships generally with the integrators. They want to be able to stand over their product, the work that has been done in animal welfare and antibiotic reduction, and the whole Campylobacter work, etc. The industry is really focused on delivering a first-class product, which is world-class. And that only comes in that partnership piece. So,
And
sorry.
I was going to say another big thing that's really developed in recent years. I think it's fair to say would be the role of women, and we've talked previously on this podcast about the women in poultry group, and I've even seen that in my tenure in the poultry sector. How when I used to go along to conferences, it was just a load of men with balding, a bit like myself and Tom, in suits. And there'd be a handful of women there, whereas actually it's really pleasing to see now when I go to events. I'd almost say it's 50-50 an awful lot of the time. We've got a lot of women, whether it's on farms or whether it's also in other industries, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's supplying technical and that sort of thing. So yeah,
I think that has been one of the biggest changes throughout my career. When I went into like Padley way back in '79, there were some women there. They're in the canteen, or they were packing butter, or they were doing secretarial work, or maybe working in the lab, and the slightly more senior. But basically, it was completely male dominated. You went to the board meetings, or as we had as an agricultural cooperative, those big annual general meetings. No females there at all. It was completely absent. And those that did start to come through, mainly in technical, it was a difficult environment. Yeah, they could go in technical, but they were never going to be able to move into management. Now, that changed over a period, and it probably changed because I saw education change quite a bit. Agricultural colleges, the food science degrees, food technology degrees, and women came through in that way, and then they developed through the industry. But yeah, the industry I left, Moy Park that I left, we had a chief executive, John McCollum, we had Ursula Lavery, very much power in the industry. We had a finance director, but at all levels through the business. Management, some of our factories are managed by very capable people who are women, and that has changed. And actually, as a man in the workforce, you have to change your calibration. I suddenly realized that I was opening doors because it was a woman in front of me, and I'm going, she's 30 years younger than me. She's physically more able to open the door than I am. What am I saying as I go to open that door? But I had been trained, that's what I'd been brought up with. But you have to think about it. What was it saying? And was I part of this problem of not letting women go forward? So I'm delighted that that's a really positive thing that's happened in my career, and I'm delighted to see it happen.
And do you think that the style of leadership, or the predominant style of leadership, has changed or evolved, along with this change that we've seen in terms of, gender equality in the workplace?
Yeah, I think it has. I suppose one of the biggest areas that has also changed is the likes of HR. Now, it's changed for a variety of reasons. It's changed because of legislation, because of necessity, because of health and safety, and all sorts of things. And that can be quite a complicated area and can be quite intensive. But yeah, I think the empathy of the mix of people running those departments has been helped by having a broader group of people. Yeah, I think it has made a significant change, and changes that you're not even totally aware of. It just becomes normal. And yeah, I've two daughters, and I like to see them going through their career, and you start to realize that society has changed too, rightly so. Everybody's expectations are male or female, are entitled to them, and there can be really push forward to do what they want to do, and that's a good thing. Now, it's not all sorted. I don't think there will always be those tensions, and we've always we all understand what goes on in society and issues we have with equality. But I think that the workforce that I was in and the company I was far ahead of many other parts of society. And yeah, that's a great thing to be able to say.
Yeah. Well, thank you, David. I think we'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up there. But thank you very much for your reflections on some of the changes that you've seen. I'd like to ask people to subscribe to the podcast if they're not already subscribed, because we are going to do a second episode with you, David, where we're going to be looking forward, aren't we? And we're going to be looking at the future and about expansion and new builds and new business models and ways that all of us can progress on, particularly on the agricultural side. So look forward to chatting with you again at that point.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
All right.
Cheerio.